Hello, friends. I am Chevy. Welcome to my mess. My shed. How are you today? How's life in your world? How's things where you are? I hope it's fantastic. It's beautiful here. A beautiful day. Legit, cool, awesome. We got rain yesterday, which was badly needed. My lawn was completely brown. I did work last night on the house. We still have a whole bunch of trim work that needs to be done, and I haven't been doing it. So I started working on that last night. Got a bunch of that done, which felt good. And then played some video. Played a video game. I turned my Switch on and played a video game. And I haven't done that in a very long time. I think that's the first time I've played my Switch this year. Malia says no. We played some Mario Golf. I guess she turned the Switch on and played Mario Golf and I joined. But ultimately it's the first time I did. Okay. Yesterday we talked about bass guitar and figuring out what's next, and I know what's next, and figuring out how to get there. Chris had some good comments, and then he had a really good follow-up question. Well, not a follow-up, a completely different topic question that I want to touch on. He said, I know you used to be a mechanic, but have you ever had a muscle car or hot rod, or ever helped build one, or ever wanted to? He has a couple of late 60s, or he had a couple of late 60s muscle cars, and his dad was a huge hot rodder. So, backstory for me is my father was an automotive instructor at a tech center for 32 years. He grew up kind of as I guess you would say, a greaser. In the 50s. He was born in, I don't know, somewhere like the 60s. And he was massively into hot rods and all that sort of stuff. So growing up, I was always around cars. My dad had a 37 International truck that he had chopped and tubbed and put a flatbed on it. He was like turning it into a dragster. There used to be a quarter mile drag strip, just not very far from my house actually. It's no longer, it's an industrial park now. But when my dad was a kid, there was a quarter mile track and he was building his car for that. He had a 67 Chevelle coupe, I think. Pretty sure it was a coupe. That he bought brand new in 67 or 66. Gave it to his mom. She didn't want it. She liked her Nova or something, so he kept the Chevelle and had that. He had a 69 El Camino, which was his daily driver for most of his career. Like, honestly, I can remember working on that thing when I was a kid with him. The 37 International definitely was a hot rod. The others, the 67, the Chevelle and the El Camino were just regular driving vehicles. Like, they were just the normal thing. We never did anything hot roddy with them. But that being said, I grew up going to all of the car shows. My dad's school hosted a car show every year. So I was inundated with car stuff from the time I was a toddler. And to be honest, it never interested me. I was much more interested in motorcycles. Still to this day, I was much more interested in motorcycles. I wanted a motorcycle. I wanted to customize a bike. I still have a vision for what my custom bike would look like. Unfortunately, my custom bike, the vision that I have started in the late 90s. It became the trend in the 2010s. The 2010s and maybe even into the 2020s. I don't know. But that flat black, no chrome, stripped down, completely bare bones bike, that was my vision of what I wanted out of a bike when I was in my teens. And that eventually became a trend that you could buy that bike like from Harley, So I just never really gave a crap about cars. But we had them. The first car I've personally, with my name on the title, have only owned 4 cars. But my first car was a 67 or a 64 Impala 4-door that my dad and I bought for $100 and drove it home. And it sat in the driveway for years. We worked on it some. It needed rebuilt really badly. It was in pretty bad shape. The idea was we'll work on the car, and that could be my, I think I was like 14 when we got it. That could be my driver when I was 16. We never really finished it. I drove it a little bit. It had 3 on the tree. It was a very clunky old car. My dad had, we had a 65 Mustang that he bought that was intended for my sister. I don't think she ever got it. My parents ended up selling it so they could come visit me when I was stationed in Hawaii. So my dad's school painted it like showroom quality paint, and then they sold it off and came and visited me. So we had a 65 Mustang. That was a pretty cool car. When I was little, my parents had a Corvair convertible. That was an awesome car. I loved that thing. We used to take it to parades and throw candy. I really enjoyed that. But other than that, have I ever built? No, not really. I did some like modern hot rodding. I had a friend who had like a early aughts Civic, and he bought one of the Japanese Civic engines, which if you, like, for whatever reason in Japan, engines are only allowed to run for a certain period of time. Then you have to change the engine or have it rebuilt because of efficiencies or whatever. I don't know. So it was very common for people to get the Japanese engines and put them in their, because you could get it from a crate engine from wherever for $500 or something. And they were like, they had like 70 more horsepower or something ridiculous like that. So I did an engine swap for a friend, which involved like a complete engine wiring harness build. I made the wiring harness piece by piece, put it together, and got his car running for him. So I've done stuff like that. I have built blocks. I have a friend who he loves building hot rods, and that's what he does, and I've helped him work on some of his stuff, but I've never really, it's not really been my thing. My Jeep would be the closest thing I had to a hot rod, and it was the least thing you could think of as a hot rod. You know, it was a custom vehicle, I should say. It was not a hot rod by any stretch of the imagination. It was a 5-speed 4-cylinder Jeep, but I had put a 4.5-inch lift on it. I had put 33s on it, maybe 32s. I'd put some pretty big tires on it. I did a bunch of custom to it so that we could off-road it, and off-roading it was my thing. But for the most part, you know, like my Neon or my Focus that's sitting in my driveway, it's like I've not done anything. I'll never do anything to it. I don't view, like, for me, cars like that, in particular, like modern stock purchase cars, you're not adding value if you put aftermarket stuff onto it. It's just for your own personal enjoyment. And prior to modern times, I didn't have the money to put into personal enjoyment. So for me, it was very impractical to mod my vehicles because it was like, you know, it's harder to sell a modded vehicle because people don't want your customizations. They want their own. And it was just, I couldn't do it. So I don't really have any desire. I don't think I've not found a vehicle where I was like, oh, I'd love to have this custom whatever. Nothing really excites me. My bike excites me. That's a good question though. Well, you'd think with a name like Chevy, I would care a lot about cars, and I don't at all. I drive a Ford. What about you? All besides Chris, because he asked the question. Chris in California, by the way. Do you guys like modded cars? Do you have one? Do you want one? Have you ever thought about building a hot rod? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for being here as always. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, being amazing friends and wonderful people. I really appreciate you. And I'll see you again tomorrow. Today's word you should know sounds smart is rest. It is a verb meaning to pull away, to take something by force or threat. Rest wants the law to your authority, to do a great right, to do a little wrong. William Shakespeare. Rest. W-R-E-S-T. That's a pretty common word, isn't it? I hate it when it's a common word.